How would your life change if a single letter revealed that the sibling lost half a century ago was still alive, hidden in silence? The wind rattled through the old roof, groaning like whispers from the past. Dust swirled in the golden beam of late afternoon light, revealing a chest slumped in the corner, its lid heavy with forgotten years. From the shadows, a calico cat emerged, its cry sharp and insistent, guarding something far greater than wood and paper. Is it madness to follow the call of memory, or is it the only path to uncover a truth long feared? Stay with me, and you will witness the night this family and this town would never forget. And you, if it were your story, would you dare open that chest? Share where you're watching from, and may this tale bring a little warmth to your day. The storm outside rattled the shutters of the old Whitaker house as dusk spilled over the town of Maple Hollow. From the street, the house looked like a forgotten sentinel, its peaked roof hunched against the sky, its windows dulled by dust and time. Maple Hollow itself was small, a quilt of fading storefronts and cracked sidewalks stitched together by memory more than progress. The wind carried the scent of wood smoke, of pine needles damp from rain, and of secrets that belonged to no one yet clung to everyone. Tonight the house was alive with the sound of creaks and sighs, as if the timbers remembered voices that no longer filled the rooms. On the second floor, a narrow staircase led to the attic, a place untouched for decades. The bulb at the top of the stairs flickered weakly, illuminating cobwebs that stretched like ghostly lace across the rafters. Boxes slumped in corners, their labels faded, and dust motes swirled in shafts of dying light that pierced through a cracked window. It was not just an attic, it was a graveyard of moments, a vault where time had chosen to linger. Into this dim space stepped Eleanor Whitaker. She was 62, her figure slender but stooped from years of quiet labor. Her silver hair, pulled back in a loose bun, escaped in strands that framed a face lined by grief rather than age alone. Her blue-gray eyes, once bright with laughter, now carried the weight of solitude. 10 years a widow, she had grown used to silence, though never comfortable with it. Her days followed a rhythm of chores, letters unsent, and meals eaten at a table too large for one. Yet tonight, Eleanor climbed the attic stairs not out of duty, but restlessness. Perhaps it was the storm, or perhaps the strange ache in her chest that came from a dream she couldn't recall. Whatever the reason, she pushed open the attic door and let the dust and shadows swallow her whole. She took a breath, coughed at the must, then pressed forward. Her fingers brushed over stacks of forgotten life, her children's school projects, her late husband's fishing gear, Christmas ornaments that had lost their shine. Then she stopped. In the far corner stood an old cedar chest, one she hadn't touched since girlhood. Its brass hinges were tarnished, the wood scarred by time. But what froze her wasn't the chest, it was what lay on top. A cat. The creature was curled like a coiled ribbon of life against the lifeless chest. Its coat was a patchwork of white, amber, and black, though dulled by dust. Its ears twitched at the sound of Eleanor's steps, and when it lifted its head, 2 golden eyes fixed on her with a gaze both sharp and unsettlingly familiar. "You don't belong here," Eleanor whispered, voice catching. The cat rose, stretching, and that was when Eleanor noticed the glint. Around its neck hung a thin silver collar, and on that collar, a letter engraved, W. Her breath hitched. Whitaker. Her heart thudded with a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. The storm outside grew harsher, wind whistling through cracks, and for a moment Eleanor felt as if the house itself had leaned closer to listen. She bent, extended her hand cautiously. The cat did not retreat. Instead, it blinked slowly, then patted across the chest as though inviting her to lift the lid. Her trembling fingers brushed the latch. With a groan, the chest surrendered. Inside lay sepia-toned photographs, their edges curled. A young couple, her parents smiled stiffly before the camera, their world dressed in 1940s wool and cotton. Behind them, children played in a yard Eleanor almost remembered. Beneath the photos, wrapped in yellowed cloth, lay a journal. Its leather cover was cracked, initials M.W. embossed faintly. Margaret Whitaker, Eleanor's mother. Eleanor sat cross-legged on the attic floor, the cat circling her like a sentinel. She opened the book. The pages smelled of ink and lavender sachets long faded. Words sprawled across them in her mother's elegant script, recounting daily life, recipes, notes of wartime shortages. Yet as Eleanor flipped, the cat hissed sharply, pawing at her wrist. "What is it?" she muttered. The cat mewed louder, insistent, as though warning or guiding. It pressed its paw against a particular section of pages. Hesitant, Eleanor turned. The handwriting shifted, no longer neat but frantic. She read aloud, barely above a whisper. "The storm is growing. They must never know. To say the child is gone is mercy, but mercy is a cruel word when the truth is otherwise." Her chest tightened. The words blurred as if her mother's voice rose through them, trembling across time. Suddenly, something slipped free. From between the pages, a folded slip of paper fluttered to the floor. Eleanor snatched it up, hands shaking. It was brittle, ink faded but legible. She smoothed it open. "Our child has never truly left us." The words struck her like a bell tolling in the silence. She stared, frozen, while the storm howled outside. The cat pressed against her knee, eyes glowing in the half-light. Eleanor whispered, barely able to hear her own voice. "What child?" The attic groaned in response, as though it too held its breath. The night pressed heavily against the Whitaker house. Rain had eased, but the air still hummed with the electricity of a storm that hadn't fully passed. In the living room, a single lamp glowed, casting amber light across worn wallpaper and a sofa that sagged from years of use. Dust stirred gently whenever Eleanor moved, as if the house breathed with her. She sat at the dining table, the journal and loose papers spread out like a deck of fate waiting to be read. Her hands hovered above them but didn't turn the page. Her fingers trembled, not from cold but from the weight of what the words might say. She knew she couldn't do this alone. The creak of the front door startled her. She looked up sharply, heart lurching, only to see Michael step in. He was 28, tall but not imposing, his frame more suited for classrooms than farm work. His hair dark brown and slightly unruly hung over eyes that always carried the soft weariness of someone who read too much and spoke too little. Tonight, his shirt was rumpled, his tie loosened, evidence of a long day teaching. Yet when he saw his aunt sitting alone under the dim lamp, his expression softened immediately. "Aunt Eleanor?" he asked, his voice steady, careful. "You said it was urgent." She gestured him closer, sliding the journal toward him. "It's your grandmother's handwriting. There are things here, things I don't understand." Michael sat, pulling the lamp nearer. The pages glowed under his steady gaze. His fingers were long, ink-stained from grading papers, and they traced the letters as though reading Braille. Eleanor watched him, the silence between them filled by the soft ticking of the clock and the faint patter of water dripping from the eaves outside. He began to read aloud, voice low, to say the child is gone is mercy, but mercy is a cruel word when the truth is otherwise. The words coiled in the room like smoke. Eleanor clenched her hands, the ridges of her wedding band pressing into her palm. Michael flipped another page, then another, his brow furrowed. These aren't just diary notes, they're letters, drafts of letters she never sent. He gathered a stack, unfolding the brittle paper. The ink had faded, but the script was unmistakable. Margaret Whitaker's hand, strong and elegant. Each letter spoke of shortages, of nights waiting for her husband's return from the mill, but woven between the lines were references to someone unnamed. The child. The one hidden. Eleanor pressed her lips tight. The room felt smaller with each word spoken. Her chest ached with the urge to ask questions, but fear kept her silent. Then Michael froze. He held up one sheet, tilting it toward the light. His eyes darted across the lines, then widened. "This," his voice faltered, then steadied. "This matches." "Matches what?" Eleanor's voice cracked. He reached into his satchel, pulling out a folder he had carried for months, family scraps he had always meant to organize. From it, he withdrew yellowing receipts, bills, and one folded sheet written in the same flowing hand. He placed it beside the journal. The letters were identical. "This was in Grandpa's things," Michael explained. "I thought it was just one of his notes." "But it's not his writing. It's hers." Eleanor stared, her throat tight. Two sets of documents, separated by decades, joined by one secret hand. The truth pressed against her like the storm pressing against the windows. Before she could speak, a sharp sound broke the air. The cat. It had followed them down from the attic, silent until now. It darted under the table, its paws scattering papers, then disappeared into the shadowed hallway. A moment later, the sound of claws scrabbling against wood echoed. Eleanor and Michael exchanged a look, uneasy, compelled, and rose. They found the cat crouched near the rickety sideboard, pawing furiously at something wedged beneath. Its tail lashed like a whip, golden eyes burning. Michael knelt, reaching under. His hand closed around a rectangle of stiff card. He pulled it free, a postcard. The edges were frayed, corners damp with time. On the front, an image, a stone church, its spire sharp against a pale sky. St. Paul's. Michael turned it over. No message, no address, only a smudge where ink had once been. Eleanor pressed a hand to her lips. St. Paul's? Her voice quivered. That's where your grandfather used to take us every Christmas Eve. The cat mewed, soft but insistent, its paw patting the card as if sealing the discovery. The room was quiet except for the distant drip of rainwater. Eleanor sank into a chair, the postcard clutched against her chest. Her mind spun. A hidden child, letters unsent, now a church staring back from the past like an accusation. Michael set his jaw, eyes darker than usual. If there are answers, that's where they are. Eleanor shook her head. Michael, this could ruin everything we thought we knew. It could dash. It already has, he cut in, not harshly, but with the quiet firmness of truth. The lamp flickered, shadows deepening on the wallpaper. Eleanor's heart pounded. She felt the edge of choice pressing against her ribs. She could bury this. Close the book, burn the letters, throw away the postcard. Let the silence continue as it always had. But the cat leapt onto the table, knocking the journal closed with a decisive thud. Its eyes met hers, unblinking, daring her to look away. She couldn't. Eleanor rose, gripping the postcard with fingers that no longer trembled. We're going to St. Paul's, she said, voice stronger than she expected. If my mother left secrets there, I need to face them. The cat meowed, a single sharp sound, then settled at her side as though it had been waiting for this moment all along. Michael reached for his coat, his tie still loosened, his expression unreadable but resolute. The house groaned in the shifting wind. The lamp flickered once, then steadied, and with that, the decision was made. The sky above Maple Hollow was the color of ash. Clouds dragged their heavy bellies across the steeple of St. Paul's, dimming what little light the evening carried. The church stood like a relic, its stones darkened by decades of storms, its wooden doors scarred by hands long gone. The bell tower, once a proud sentinel, sagged beneath vines and rust. Wind whispered through the cracked glass of the windows, carrying with it the faint smell of mildew and candle wax. Eleanor and Michael climbed the stone steps slowly, their breaths visible in the chill. The cat padded ahead, tail high, as if it had claimed the church as its own. When the door groaned open, the sound rippled through the sanctuary. Candles flickered along the altar, their flames fragile against the draft. The pews were empty, yet the space felt crowded with silence, with memory, with the ghosts of prayers whispered too long ago. From the far end of the aisle, a figure emerged, Father Samuel Boone. He was in his 70s, tall but bent, his cassock faded at the seams. His face was carved with lines that spoke of years of confession, of secrets he had carried but never shed. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his spectacles, but his eyes, dark and sharp, remained steady. Eleanor Whitaker, he said, voice rough with both recognition and unease. Eleanor inclined her head politely, though her heart pounded in her chest. Michael stood at her side, watchful. But Samuel's gaze dropped quickly, not to her, not to Michael, but to the cat at their feet. His lips parted, and for a moment he seemed robbed of speech. That creature. His hand gripped the back of a pew. I've seen it before. Or one just like it. It haunted these grounds 20 years ago, always near the crypt, always watching. The cat blinked, indifferent, then leapt onto a bench as though to confirm its place in the story. Eleanor's voice quavered. Father, we came for answers. There are things in my mother's journals, things about a child. The sanctuary grew colder. The candles sputtered. Samuel straightened slowly, his shoulders heavy with something invisible. He gestured toward a side door. This way. The archive room smelled of paper and damp stone. Wooden shelves lined the walls, sagging under ledgers and baptismal records bound in cracked leather. Dust floated in the lamplight as if disturbed spirits had risen to listen. Eleanor stepped forward, her hands drawn to the spines of the books. She traced their faded lettering, her heart caught between hope and dread. Michael pulled one ledger free, setting it on the table. The binding creaked, reluctant to reveal its secrets. He flipped through, careful, his ink-stained fingers leaving no mark. Then he stopped. "Here," he whispered. Eleanor leaned close. Her eyes fell upon the neat script. Grace Whitaker, baptized. Date of birth, identical to that of her sister Eleanor. Her breath left her in a shudder. She pressed her palm to the page, needing to feel its truth. Tears gathered, unbidden. She lived?" Eleanor's voice cracked. Samuel's silence was heavy. He removed his glasses, rubbing them with a cloth, though his hands trembled too much to steady the lenses. His jaw tightened. "I should have burned those records," he muttered. Michael stiffened. "Why would you—" But Eleanor's voice cut through, sharp with pain. "Father." "Tell me." Samuel closed his eyes. The lamplight carved hollows into his face, turning him into both priest and penitent. "It was the war," he said slowly. "Rumors, scandal. Your family could not afford another shadow. When your sister was born, she was taken. I saw it with my own eyes. They said it was to protect her, to protect the Whitaker name. They asked me to witness, to stay silent." The words struck like thunder. Eleanor staggered back, hand gripping the edge of the table. Her chest burned with fury, with betrayal, with the unbearable thought that her sister had breathed, had lived, while she had been told otherwise. Michael's fists clenched. "Who took her?" Samuel's lips thinned. "A carriage, a storm. She was carried away that night. I was told never to ask where, and I never did. Perhaps that was my sin." The cat hissed suddenly, the sound slicing through the room. It leapt from the bench and landed before a wooden door at the far wall. Its claws raked the wood, furious, insistent. Eleanor's head snapped toward it. The sound echoed sharp, relentless. Michael moved first, seizing a lantern. Eleanor followed, her breath ragged, her heart heavy with a truth she could neither accept nor deny. The cat clawed harder, wood splintering, its eyes wild with urgency. Samuel's face drained of color. "No," he whispered, voice barely audible. "Not there." Eleanor stepped forward. "Then that's exactly where we need to go." The lantern light shivered against the door as Michael set his hand on the latch. The air grew colder, pressing close, heavy with the weight of all that had been hidden. The cat gave one final piercing cry, and the door groaned open. The door to the church's undercroft moaned open, exhaling a breath of cold that smelled of stone, rust, and secrets left too long in the dark. Lantern light wavered against the damp walls as Michael descended first, boots echoing hollowly. Eleanor followed, one hand gripping the rail, the other clutching her shawl tight around her shoulders. The cat darted ahead, its silhouette sliding between the shadows, tail flicking like a metronome marking each heartbeat. The air was heavier here. Dust rose with each step, catching in the light like a storm of ashes. A drip of water echoed from somewhere unseen, steady as a clock. Eleanor's chest tightened with each sound. She could feel her mother's words pressing against her heart. "The child never left us." The narrow stairwell opened into a stone chamber. Rows of forgotten relics crowded the room. Broken candlesticks, moth-eaten altar cloths, crates stacked high and sagging. And in the center, half hidden beneath a tarp, was a wooden chest. Its iron hinges were rusted, but its presence commanded the room like an altar of its own. The cat leapt onto it at once, curling its body as if guarding something precious. A low growl rumbled from its throat. Michael approached slowly, lantern in hand. His face, usually calm, measured, was taut now. His jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. He lowered the lantern, letting its glow spill across the chest. Dust coated the wood, but carved faintly into the lid was a letter. G. Eleanor's breath caught. She reached out, fingertips trembling. "Help me," she whispered. Michael set the lantern down, and together they pried open the chest. The hinges screamed, reluctant. Then the lid gave way. Inside lay the artifacts of a childhood that had never belonged to Eleanor's memories. A small cotton dress yellowed with age, a pair of scuffed shoes with laces tied neatly as if waiting for tiny feet, and upon a folded blanket, a silver chain necklace with a charm shaped into the letter G. Eleanor pressed the necklace to her chest, her vision blurring. "Grace." The name broke from her lips like a prayer, her sister's name. the sister she had buried in her heart decades ago, now whispering back through cloth and silver. Michael crouched lower, rummaging carefully. His fingers brushed brittle paper tucked against the lining. He pulled it free, a ledger page. By the lantern's light, the words grew sharper, darker. His voice was tight. "This isn't Father Boone's hand. It's Sheriff Danner's father." The sheriff at the time, Eleanor bent close. She read the words aloud, halting. "Infant deceased. Certificate filed. Witness Boone." Her voice cracked. They lied. They wrote her death into paper. Michael's hands shook as he folded the page back. His face, usually the mask of a teacher, softened into something raw anger and disbelief tangled together. They built an entire lie, and it held for 60 years. The cat hissed sharply, startling them both. It crouched low, tail lashing, its gaze fixed on the shadows behind them. Eleanor turned, heart hammering. "What is it?" But there was only silence, the hush of stone and the soft drip of water. Still, she couldn't shake the sense of being watched. She looked back at the chest, at the clothes, the shoes, the necklace. Each object was a piece of the puzzle, fragments of a life erased but not extinguished. Tears welled in her eyes. She lived, Michael. She was taken, but she lived. Someone raised her. Michael placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder, grounding her. His voice was steady, though his eyes burned. "Then we find out who." For a fleeting moment, the chamber felt less suffocating. Hope slipped through the cracks of fear. Eleanor closed her eyes, imagining Grace alive somewhere, breathing, laughing, perhaps even waiting. But the illusion shattered with a sound, a sharp tap, the echo of wood striking stone. Eleanor froze. Another tap followed, slower, heavier, deliberate. The unmistakable rhythm of a cane against the stairs. Michael snatched the lantern, raising it high. Light chased the shadows back to the stairwell, and there, descending step by step, was a figure. Sheriff Walt Danner. Age had bent him, but not broken him. He leaned heavily on his cane, the wood thudding with each step. His hat shadowed his face, but the lines of power and authority still clung to him like a second skin. His eyes, pale and sharp, fixed on the chest and then on them. "Some things," he rasped, voice echoing in the chamber, "are best left buried." The cat arched its back, hissing loud enough to pierce the silence. Eleanor's grip tightened on the necklace, her pulse roaring in her ears. The cane tapped once more, slow and final, as if sealing the chamber shut with his words. The lantern flame trembled as if it too feared the man standing at the foot of the stairs. Sheriff Walt Danner's cane struck stone with a sound like a gavel, each tap echoing across the undercroft. His shadow stretched long and crooked along the wall, swallowing the light. Eleanor's chest tightened as though the very air had thickened, pressed down by the authority he still carried. "Close that chest," he rasped, voice gravel dragged through years of silence. "Some truths do more harm than good." Michael stepped instinctively in front of his aunt, his body tense, eyes flashing in the wavering glow. His hand gripped the ledger page they had just found, his knuckles white. Eleanor clutched the silver necklace with the letter G, its cold weight burning against her palm. She felt the past roaring inside her, louder than her fear. "This truth belongs to me," she whispered. Danner's eyes narrowed. For an instant he looked almost sorrowful, but the mask hardened again. He lifted his cane slightly, as if to strike the chest shut himself. Then the cat moved. With a sudden screech, it launched from the chest, claws flashing. Danner staggered back, raising an arm in surprise. His cane clattered to the ground. Papers spilled from his coat pocket, fluttering across the stone floor like startled birds. Michael dropped to his knees, snatching at the scattered sheets. He shoved them into his satchel, breath ragged, heart pounding. "Run!" Eleanor hissed. But the sheriff was faster than his age suggested. He lunged forward, grabbing Michael's arm, his grip like iron. Michael grimaced, twisting against him. The lantern rocked dangerously, shadows lurching across the chamber. The cat yowled and raked its claws down Danner's sleeve. With a curse, he let go. Michael tore free, clutching the satchel tight against his chest. The old man's face burned red in the lantern light. "You don't know what you're playing with, boy," he growled. Michael's voice came sharp, cutting through the darkness. "We know enough. Enough to see you've been hiding lies." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Eleanor stooped, her trembling hands reaching for one of the fallen documents. She froze when her eyes caught the image pressed against the paper. A photograph. Her breath stalled. The edges were frayed, but the woman's face was clear dark hair swept back, sharp cheekbones, eyes that carried a familiar sadness. Eleanor's knees weakened. She staggered backward until her shoulders struck the cold wall. The woman in the picture looked like her. Not perfectly, not as a mirror, but close enough that it stole her breath. The same curve of the chin, the same haunted eyes. Michael leaned closer, his face pale in the lantern glow. "She looks like you," he murmured. Eleanor traced the photo with trembling fingertips. Her heart clenched, and in that pain bloomed a fragile, terrifying hope. "Grace," she whispered. Danner's cane scraped against stone as he retrieved it. His breathing labored. "Leave it, Eleanor. That woman has her life. Better you keep to yours." But Eleanor shook her head. Tears blurred her vision, yet her voice was steady. "You knew. All these years, you knew she lived." Danner's lips thinned, his silence a confession more damning than words. Michael rifled quickly through the other documents, his fingers landing on a letter tucked behind the photo. He read aloud, his voice trembling. "Coleman family, guardianship, child placed under care during wartime, new records filed." He swallowed hard. "Coleman. That's not our name." Eleanor's pulse hammered in her ears. The truth coiled tight around her ribs. Grace had lived. She had been given to another family, her life rewritten. Her hands shook as she turned the photo over. A faint scrawl was penciled on the back, faded but legible. Silver Creek, Wyoming. The lantern hissed, its flame bowing low. Dust swirled in the air, carrying the weight of 60 years of lies. Eleanor pressed the photo against her chest, her voice breaking into a sob and a whisper all at once. "She's alive." The cat leapt to the top of the chest again, tail swishing, golden eyes gleaming as if in agreement. Michael placed a steadying hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "Then we'll find her," he said firmly, though his own voice cracked with awe. Danner's face tightened, but he did not move closer. His cane tapped once against the floor-hard final. "If you go down that road, there's no turning back. And you may not like what you find." But Eleanor no longer looked at him. Her gaze was fixed on the single word, the place name that glowed like a beacon in the lantern's failing light, Silver Creek. Her lips trembled, her breath shallow as she whispered it aloud. The syllables trembled through the chamber, pulling her toward a future she had never dared imagine. The train rattled to a stop at Silver Creek, Wyoming, its whistle echoing across the valley like a call from another lifetime. The town lay cradled by low hills, its streets lined with clapboard houses painted in fading colors, their porches sagging but still proud. Wind carried the smell of hay, pine resin, and chimney smoke. The sun had begun to lean westward, its golden light brushing rooftops, washing the town in the colors of memory. Eleanor stepped down from the train car, Michael steadying her arm. She clutched her handbag close, the photograph of the woman of grace pressed inside as though it were her compass. The cat slipped silently from beneath their seat, padding onto the platform with casual certainty, as if it had walked these streets long before. Her heart raced. Every sound seemed sharpened, the creak of wagon wheels, the laughter of children spilling from a schoolyard, the bark of a dog somewhere down the street. She had not felt so alive or so afraid in decades. Michael's voice was low but firm. "Are you ready?" Eleanor's lips trembled. She nodded once. "I've been ready all my life." They walked slowly through Silver Creek, the cat trotting ahead, weaving between fence posts and stepping stones. At the end of Maple Lane stood a modest white house, shutters blue, garden blooming with asters and late roses. A rocking chair sat on the porch, worn smooth by use, and there, tending to a row of clay pots, was a woman, Grace Coleman. She was 60 now, tall and slender, her posture straight despite the years. Her hair, once dark, had silvered at the temples, tied back in a simple knot. Her hands were earth-stained from the soil, but her movements were gentle, precise. There was something in the slope of her shoulders, the turn of her head, that struck Eleanor with the force of recognition. Her breath caught, sharp as glass. The cat bounded up the steps, leaping into Grace's path. The woman gasped, stumbling slightly, then bent to stroke its fur. Her hand paused when her eyes lifted and met Eleanor's across the garden gate. Time shattered. Grace straightened, her lips parting. Her eyes widened, green-gray like Eleanor's, holding both shock and something deeper, something unspoken yet undeniable. Eleanor's hands trembled against the gate. "Grace," she whispered. The name carried on a breath she'd been holding for 60 years. Grace took a step forward, then another. Her face crumpled, tears springing as if from a well too long sealed. "Eleanor?" The sisters closed the distance in seconds, colliding in an embrace fierce enough to bridge decades. Eleanor's tears soaked into Grace's shoulder. Grace's hands gripped her back as if she would never let go. Michael looked on, eyes shining, his chest tight with awe. The cat curled around their feet, purring loudly, its golden eyes reflecting the setting sun. Inside the house, the air smelled of fresh bread and lavender soap. Photographs lined the mantel, children, grandchildren, holidays long past. Grace guided Eleanor to a chair, her hands never straying far, as though afraid her sister might vanish if not touched. "I thought you were gone," Grace whispered, her voice raw. They told me the same," Eleanor answered, her throat thick. "But I felt you, always. Somewhere in the silence, I knew you were alive." Michael sat quietly, absorbing every word. He had never seen his aunt so alive, her voice trembling not with sorrow, but with rediscovered joy. Grace turned toward the cat, now perched on the hearth. "I know this creature," she murmured, "or one just like it. When I was a child, there was always a calico nearby. It would follow me, guard me. When I married into the Coleman family, I thought I'd lost it. But maybe—" She trailed off, stroking the cat's fur with reverence. "Maybe it never left. Or maybe this one carries its memory." Eleanor's gaze softened. "It brought me to you." As twilight deepened, Michael leaned against the window frame, watching the sisters speak in hushed tones, hands clasped across the table. The cat stretched lazily, then leapt onto Eleanor's lap. Something metallic clinked softly against the wood. Eleanor frowned. Around the cat's neck, beneath the silver collar, something protruded, a fold of fabric, worn thin. With gentle fingers, she tugged it free. A scrap of paper, yellowed and delicate. Her breath stilled as she unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable, Margaret Whitaker's elegant script. "Let's stay together." The words blurred as tears filled Eleanor's eyes. She passed it to Grace, whose hands shook as she held it. The sisters wept softly, their mother's voice reaching across the years, across the lies, binding them once more. Michael swallowed hard, his chest burning. He felt as though he were witnessing not just reunion, but resurrection. Later, as the sun set behind Silver Creek, the three of them stepped out into the yard. The horizon blazed in hues of gold and rose, the light softening every wrinkle, every scar. The sisters stood side by side, their shoulders brushing. Michael lingered behind them, watching silently. The cat settled between Eleanor and Grace, tail curled, eyes glowing as if it carried the weight of every secret uncovered. Eleanor looked at her sister, voice trembling but certain. "I am not alone anymore." Grace squeezed her hand. "You never were." The camera of the world seemed to pull back then, framing them in the soft glow of dusk. The calico, sitting tall and still, became the centerpiece, the living emblem of memory, of loss endured, of bonds restored. And as the last light spilled across their faces, Eleanor closed her eyes and let peace settle into the cracks of her heart. Sometimes, the things we believe are lost forever are only waiting in silence to be found again. Eleanor's journey shows us that family is not just blood, but the memories, love, and quiet bonds that endure through time. Even when secrets bury the truth, love has a way of finding its path back through a photograph, a letter, even the watchful eyes of a small cat. In the end, it reminds us, no matter the years, it is never too late for healing, never too late for love, never too late to come home. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching this story from tonight? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this tale touched your heart, consider subscribing so you'll be here with us for the next journey. Until then, may love and memory always guide your steps.